The morning sun painted golden streaks across the hospital corridor as Catherine walked slowly toward the private room. Her footsteps echoed softly against the polished floor, each step feeling heavier than the last. She had made this journey countless times over the past 3 months, but today felt different. Today carried the weight of finality. William lay propped against white pillows, his once strong frame now diminished by the relentless battle he had been fighting. The cancer had taken so much from him, but his eyes still held that familiar spark of warmth. When he saw her approaching, a gentle smile crossed his pale lips as she entered the room, carrying with her the scent of the lavender perfume he had given her on their first anniversary 25 years ago. "You came," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the soft hum of medical equipment. The machines surrounding his bed beeped rhythmically, marking time in a way that seemed both comforting and ominous. Catherine pulled the familiar chair closer to his bedside, the same chair she had occupied during countless vigils. She had brought it from home weeks ago when the doctors gently explained that William would be more comfortable here than anywhere else. The chair had become her anchor in this sterile world of uncertainty. "I promised I would always be here," she replied softly, settling into the worn cushions that had molded to her form over these difficult months. "Remember our wedding day? Through sickness and health, till death do us part?" William's eyes glistened with unshed tears. They both knew those vows had been tested in ways they never imagined when they spoke them as young, hopeful newlyweds. Life had given them beautiful children, successful careers, and a love that had weathered many storms. But this storm felt different, final, insurmountable. The room fell into comfortable silence, filled only by the sounds of William's labored breathing and the distant murmur of hospital life beyond their door. Catherine studied his face, memorizing every line, every freckle, every expression that had become so dear to her over the decades they had shared together. She remembered the day they first met at the local coffee shop near the university. William had been reading a thick medical textbook, preparing for his residency exams, while she graded papers from her third-grade students. He had accidentally knocked over her coffee with his elbow while reaching for his highlighter, and his mortified apology had made her laugh instead of getting angry. "I was such a clumsy fool that day," William said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. Even now, weakened as he was, he still seemed to know exactly what she was thinking. "I ruined your favorite sweater with that coffee? You bought me a new one the next week," Catherine smiled, touching his hand gently. "A much prettier one. I still have it, you know. I wore it yesterday when the kids came to visit." Their children, now adults with families of their own, had been taking turns staying at the hospital. Sarah, their eldest, had inherited William's medical mind and worked as a nurse in the pediatric ward. She understood the medical terms and treatment options better than anyone, but that knowledge made everything harder for her to bear. Michael, their younger son, had his father's gentle nature, but his mother's artistic soul, right? Local high school and had been sketching quietly in the corner during many of these long hospital days, capturing moments that would soon become precious memories. Both children struggled with the reality of losing their father, the man who had taught them to ride bicycles, helped with homework, and walked Sarah down the aisle just 2 years ago. William had been determined to see his daughter married, and he had managed to look strong and healthy that day through sheer willpower and carefully timed medications. "They're good kids," William said, his voice growing weaker. "We raised them, right, didn't we?" "We did," Catherine agreed, squeezing his hand gently. "They love you so much. Sarah wants to take time off work to be here more, but I told her you wouldn't want that. You always said families should live their lives, not put them on hold." William nodded slightly, conserving his energy. The doctors had explained that he was entering the final stages now. His body was shutting down gradually, peacefully. They had done everything possible to keep him comfortable and pain-free, but there was nothing more they could do to stop the inevitable progression of his illness. Catherine pulled a photo from her purse, one of their favorite family pictures taken during last year's vacation to the lake house. William's brother had snapped it during a barbecue, capturing a moment of pure joy as the whole family laughed at something Michael had said. William looked healthy and strong in the picture, his arms wrapped around Catherine as their children and grandchildren surrounded them. "Look," she said, holding the photo where he could see it easily. Remember this day? Little Emma had just learned to swim, and she was so proud of herself. She made me watch her jump off the dock about 50 times. William chuckled weakly, the sound more like a whisper. Kept saying, "Watch me, Grandpa. Watch me." Emma was Sarah's 4-year-old daughter, and she adored her grandfather. She had drawn him pictures every week since he had been in the hospital. Colorful crayon drawings of flowers and sunshine that the nurses had taped to his walls. The child's innocence provided brightness in these dark days, though she didn't fully understand why Grandpa couldn't come home. As the afternoon wore on, Catherine found herself sharing memories, telling stories that made William smile despite his weaknesses. She spoke of their first home, a tiny apartment where they had been so happy with so little. She reminded him of the Christmas when Michael was 6 and had tried to stay awake to catch Santa, only to fall asleep under the tree with milk and cookies clutched in his small hands. The evening shift change brought new nurses, but Catherine barely noticed the quiet activity around them. Her world had narrowed to this room, this bed, this man who had been her everything for more than half her life. William had dozed off and on throughout the afternoon, and she had used those quiet moments to simply watch him breathe, to memorize the peaceful expression on his face when sleep temporarily freed him from discomfort. Dr. Martinez, William's oncologist, appeared in the doorway with his usual gentle demeanor. Catherine had grown to appreciate his honest but kind approach over the months of treatment. He never gave false hope, but he also never took away dignity or peace from his patients and their families. "How's he doing this evening?" Dr. Martinez asked quietly, checking the chart at the foot of the bed. "Sleeping more," Catherine replied, keeping her voice low. "He ate a little soup at lunch, but not much." The doctor nodded knowingly. He had seen this pattern many times before, and Catherine understood what his expression meant without words being spoken. Time was growing shorter, perhaps measured in days rather than weeks now. "I want you to know that we're monitoring his comfort level very carefully," Dr. Martinez said gently. "He's not in pain. The medication is keeping him peaceful." "Thank you," Catherine whispered. "That means everything to me. He's always been so afraid of being a burden to anyone." After the doctor left, Catherine settled back into her chair and reached for William's hand. Even in sleep, his fingers responded to her touch, curling slightly around hers in the way they had done thousands of times before. This simple gesture, so automatic and natural, carried the weight of their entire relationship. She thought about their hands throughout the years, young hands that had fumbled nervously with wedding rings 25 years ago, working hands that had built a life together, healing patients as a family physician, hers shaping young minds in her classroom, tender hands that had rocked babies to sleep and wiped away childhood tears. Those same hands had applauded at school plays and graduation ceremonies, had packed countless lunches and tied countless shoelaces. They had held each other through her miscarriage between Sarah and Michael, supporting each other through grief that had nearly broken them both. They had celebrated promotions and mourned the loss of parents, always finding strength in their connection. "Catherine." William's voice startled her from her memories. His eyes were open, clearer than they had been all day. "I'm here," she said immediately, leaning closer. "Do you need anything? Water? Ice chips?" "Just you," he replied, his grip on her hand strengthening slightly. "I need to tell you something while I still can." Catherine's heart raced, fearing what he might say. Were these the last words? The final goodbye? She wasn't ready, would never be ready. But she knew she needed to be strong for him in whatever came next. "I know this is hard for you," William continued, his words coming slowly but clearly. "Watching me like this, seeing me so weak, it's not how I wanted you to remember me." "Stop," Catherine said firmly but gently. "Don't say that. You're still the strongest man I know. You're fighting this with such grace, such courage. I'm proud of you." William's eyes filled with tears. "I wanted to grow old with you, really old. I wanted to see Emma graduate from high school, maybe college. I wanted to dance with you at Michael's wedding someday." The weight of unfulfilled dreams hung heavy in the air between them. Catherine felt her own tears threatening, but she fought them back. This wasn't the time for her grief. It was time to give William what he needed. You know what I realized today? She said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. We did grow old together. 25 years isn't nearly enough, but we packed so much love into those years. We lived fully, William. We loved completely. Tell me about the good times, he requested, his eyes closing again, but his hands still holding hers firmly. Tell me about us when we were young and thought we had forever. So Catherine began to weave their story like a warm blanket around them both. She spoke of their honeymoon trip to Maine, where they had eaten lobster for the first time and gotten lost driving the coastal roads because they were too busy talking and laughing to pay attention to directions. She remembered how William had insisted on carrying her over the threshold of their first apartment. Even though he had pulled his back and complained about it for a week afterward, she told him about the night Sarah was born, how he had cried harder than she had when they first heard their daughter's cry. He had been so afraid of holding something so tiny and perfect. But within hours, he was an expert at diaper changes and midnight feedings. Catherine could still picture him walking the floor at 3 a.m, singing off-key lullabies that somehow always worked to soothe their fussy baby. You sang to Michael too, she continued, watching William's face relax as the memories washed over him. That silly song about the truck driver and his dog. I never could figure out where you learned that one. My dad used to sing it to me, William murmured. I never told you that, did I? He would sing it when I couldn't sleep during thunderstorms. Catherine felt a pang of sadness for all the small stories they might not have time to share. After 25 years together, she thought she knew everything about him. But there were still little memories and moments that had never come up in conversation. Now those untold stories might remain forever unspoken. The room grew darker as evening approached, and Catherine realized she had been there for nearly 12 hours. The nursing staff had brought her meals that sat mostly untouched on the bedside table. Her back ached from sitting in the same position for so long, but she couldn't bring herself to leave, not even for a short walk down the hallway. You should go home, William said, reading her discomfort. Get some real sleep in our bed. Take a shower, you'll feel better. I don't want to leave you, Catherine admitted. What if... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice her fear that he might slip away while she was gone. The thought of him dying alone terrified her more than anything else about this impossible situation. I won't go anywhere without you, William promised, his eyes meeting hers with the same intensity that had captivated her all those years ago at the coffee shop. I'll wait for you. I've always waited for you. Catherine knew he meant it. Had always been a man of his word, someone who kept promises no matter how difficult they became. When she had struggled through graduate school while teaching full-time, he had waited patiently for her attention during long nights of studying. When her mother had been ill and needed months of care, he had waited while Catherine divided herself between their home and her childhood bedroom, nursing her mother through her final weeks. Reluctantly, Catherine agreed to go home for a few hours. Sarah arrived just as she was gathering her purse and the small bag of items she had been keeping at William's bedside. Their daughter looked exhausted but determined, carrying the same quiet strength that had always reminded Catherine so much of her father. How is he? Sarah asked, immediately moving to check William's vital signs with professional efficiency mixed with personal concern. Peaceful, Catherine replied. He's been talking more today than he has all week. It's like he's trying to say everything while he still can. Sarah nodded, understanding. As a nurse, she had seen this pattern before. Sometimes patients experienced a period of unexpected alertness and energy before the very end, a final gift that allowed for meaningful goodbyes. The medical staff called it terminal lucidity, but Sarah preferred to think of it as grace. Go home, Mom, Sarah said gently, settling into the bedside chair. I'll stay with him tonight. We'll probably just talk about his patients and medical school stories. You know how he likes to tell me about the complicated cases he solved? Catherine hesitated at the doorway, looking back at the two people she loved most in the world. William's eyes were closed, but she could see the slight smile on his face as Sarah began updating him on the happenings in the pediatric ward. Their daughter had inherited his healing touch and his ability to find hope. Even in difficult circumstances, the drive home felt surreal. Catherine had made this journey between hospital and home so many times that she could probably do it in her sleep, but tonight everything looked different. The familiar streets seemed to belong to someone else's life, a life where William would be waiting at home with a cup of tea and questions about his condition. Their house stood quiet and dark against the evening sky. Catherine had left lights on that morning, but the timers had turned them off hours ago. She sat in the driveway for several minutes, gathering the courage to enter their home alone. The place would feel empty without William's presence, without the possibility that he might suddenly recover and walk through the front door behind her. Inside, everything remained exactly as she had left it that morning. William's coffee cup still sat in the sink from 3 days ago, the last morning he had been home. His reading glasses lay folded on the kitchen table next to a medical journal he had been reviewing. These ordinary objects now felt like precious artifacts from a time when life still held the possibility of ordinary moments. Catherine walked through their bedroom, touching William's pillow, breathing in the faint scent of his cologne that still lingered on his pajamas. She had been sleeping in the guest room for weeks, unable to bear the emptiness of their bed without him. But tonight, she climbed under their covers. Wrapping herself in the blanket they had shared for so many years, sleep came in fragments, interrupted by dreams where William was healthy and strong again. In her dreams, they were young and planning their future, making lists of places they wanted to travel and things they wanted to accomplish together. She woke several times reaching for him, expecting to find his warm body beside her, only to remember with fresh pain that he was lying in a hospital bed across town. The phone rang at 6 in the morning, jolting Catherine from a deeper sleep than she had expected to find. Her heart stopped as she reached for the receiver, fearing the worst news delivered by a kind but professional voice. "Mom?" Sarah's voice was tired but calm. "He's okay. He had a good night. Come soon. He's been asking for you since about 5 o'clock." Catherine dressed quickly, grabbing the clothes she had laid out the night before. She had learned to keep things simple during these hospital days, choosing comfortable outfits that could withstand long hours of sitting and the occasional tear. As she drove back through the awakening city, she tried to prepare herself for what the day might bring. The hospital had a different energy in the early morning hours. The night shift was finishing their duties while the day shift arrived with fresh energy and new hope. Catherine had grown to recognize many of the staff members, and they greeted her with gentle nods and understanding smiles. Everyone knew her story, knew that she was living through every spouse's worst nightmare with remarkable grace. William was awake and alert when she entered his room, more so than he had been in days. His eyes followed her movement as she approached his bed, and his hand reached out for hers before she had even settled into her chair. "I missed you," he said simply, his voice stronger than it had been the night before. "I missed you too," Catherine replied, intertwining their fingers in the familiar gesture that had become their lifeline. "Sarah says you had a good night. We talked about her work, about the children she helps every day," William said with obvious pride. "She's going to be okay, Catherine. She's strong like her mother. She's compassionate like her father," Catherine countered. "That's what makes her such a good nurse." They settled into comfortable conversation, discussing their children's lives and accomplishments. Michael had called that morning with news that his art students were planning a special exhibition in William's honor. The gesture touched them, both deeply, knowing that William's influence had reached far beyond his own family through Catherine's stories and Michael's memories. "I want to see the sunrise," William said suddenly, looking toward the window where dawn light was beginning to filter through the blinds. Catherine immediately stood to adjust the window coverings, letting in more of the soft morning light. View from William's room looked out over a small garden that the hospital maintained for patients and families. Even in late autumn, there were still touches of color from hardy flowers that bloomed despite the cooling temperatures. When Kate held William's hand one last time, a silent farewell that spoke volumes together, they watched as the sun climbed higher, painting the hospital garden in golden hues that made even the fading autumn flowers look vibrant and alive. Catherine had raised William's bed slightly so he could see better. They sat in peaceful silence, her hand never leaving his, as they witnessed another beginning to what both knew might be their last day together. "Do you remember our first sunrise?" William asked softly, his eyes still fixed on the growing light outside the window. Catherine smiled. the memory coming back instantly. Our camping trip to the mountains during our second year of dating. You insisted we hike to that peak to watch the sunrise, even though neither of us were morning people. You complained the entire way up that trail. William chuckled weakly. But when we reached the top and saw that view, you cried. Happy tears, Catherine clarified. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, till I looked at you watching it, and I realized you were even more beautiful to me. That was the morning I knew I was going to marry you, William confessed. I didn't have a ring yet, didn't have a plan, but I knew. Standing there watching you watch that sunrise, I knew you were going to be my wife. Catherine felt tears threatening again, but these were different tears. These carried joy mixed with the sadness, love intertwined with loss. She thought about that young woman who had hiked up a mountain at dawn just to make her boyfriend happy, never imagining she was witnessing the sunrise on her future, on a love that would define her entire life. I knew too, she admitted. I think I knew even before that morning, maybe from the day you spilled coffee on my sweater and looked so horrified. You had such a kind heart, William. That's what I fell in love with first. The morning brought a parade of familiar faces. Dr. Martinez checked in early. His expression gentle, but serious, as he spoke quietly with Catherine outside William's room. The message was clear, even without specific words being spoken. This was likely their final day together, possibly their final few hours. Michael arrived around 10 o'clock, bringing with him the scent of autumn air and the energy of the outside. A world that seemed so foreign now, kissed his father's forehead gently and took his place on the other side of the bed, creating a protective circle of love around William. The art exhibition is set for next month, Michael told his father. The students have been working on pieces inspired by stories I've told them about you. Emma drew you a new picture too, but Sarah has it. She wanted to bring it herself this afternoon. William's eyes filled with tears at the mention of his granddaughter. Emma had been the light of his life since the day she was born, and the thought of missing her childhood milestones broke his heart in ways that his own mortality couldn't touch. Children deserved grandparents who would see them graduate, get married, have children of their own. Tell her I love her, William whispered. Tell her Grandpa loves her more than all the stars in the sky. She'll remember that phrase. Michael nodded, his own tears flowing freely now. He had inherited his mother's emotional nature alongside his father's gentle spirit, and he had never learned to hide his feelings the way some men did. William had always been proud of Michael's sensitivity, knowing it would make him a better teacher, a better husband someday, a better father. The afternoon passed quietly, with family members taking turns sitting beside William's bed. Sarah returned, with Emma's latest artwork, a crayon drawing of a house with a big sun and stick figures holding hands. In the corner, written in a 4-year-old's careful letters, were the words, I love Grandpa. She wanted to come see you, Sarah explained, but I thought it might be too much for her. She doesn't really understand what's happening. You made the right choice, William agreed. Let her remember me healthy and strong. Let her remember the grandfather who pushed her on the swing and taught her to plant flowers. As evening approached, Catherine found herself alone with William again. The day had been filled with visitors and conversations, but now in the gathering darkness, it was just the two of them as it had been for so many years. The room felt peaceful, despite the weight of what was coming. William's breathing had become more labored as the day progressed, and Catherine could see that each breath required effort now. The nurses had increased his comfort medications, ensuring that he felt no pain, but everyone understood that his body was beginning its final shutdown. Catherine, William said, his voice barely above a whisper now, come closer. She leaned in until her face was inches from his, close enough to see every beloved feature, close enough to breathe the same air he was breathing. Thank you, he said simply. Thank you for loving me, for giving me the most beautiful life I could have imagined. Thank you for Sarah and Michael, for making me a father. Thank you for 25 years of happiness. Thank you for choosing me, Catherine replied, her voice breaking. Thank you for spilling that coffee, for being brave enough to ask me out, for making me your wife. Thank you for being the best father our children could have had. We held each other's gaze for long moments, communicating without words all the things that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Their love had always been like this, deeper than words, stronger than the obstacles life had placed in their path. "I'm scared," William admitted finally, the first time he had expressed fear throughout his entire illness. "I know, Catherine," said, squeezing his hand tighter. "I'm scared too, but you don't have to be afraid, my love. You've lived such a good life, helped so many people, loved so completely. Whatever comes next, you'll be okay." "Will you be okay?" William asked, his eyes searching her face. Catherine wanted to say yes, wanted to assure him that she would be fine, would find a way to live without him and be happy again. But she had never lied to him in 25 years of marriage, and she wouldn't start now in their final moments together. "I don't know," she answered honestly, "but I'll try. For you, for our children, for Emma, I'll try to find a way to be okay."
Ow!
William nodded, accepting her honesty, as he always had. One of the foundations of their marriage had been their ability to tell each other the truth, even when it was difficult or frightening. When Kate held William's hand one last time, a silent farewell that spoke volumes, the night deepened around them. And Catherine noticed that William's grip on her hand had become lighter, as if he was slowly letting go of his connection to the physical world. His breathing continued to grow shallower, with longer pauses between each breath that made Catherine's heart race with fear before the next breath finally came. The night nurse, a kind woman named Margaret, whom Catherine had grown to appreciate during these long weeks, entered quietly to check on William's comfort level. She moved with practiced efficiency, adjusting his pillows and checking his medications without disturbing the peaceful atmosphere that had settled over the room. "He's very comfortable, Margaret," assured Catherine softly. "No pain, no distress. This is exactly how we want it to be." Catherine nodded gratefully, though she wondered how any of this could be described as comfortable. Losing the person you loved most in the world felt like the opposite of comfort. Like everything safe and familiar was being stripped away piece by piece. After Margaret left, William opened his eyes again, focusing on Catherine with what seemed like tremendous effort. "Tell me about tomorrow," he whispered. "Tell me what you'll do tomorrow." The question surprised Catherine. Of all the things they might discuss in these precious final hours, she hadn't expected him to ask about her future, about the time that would come after he was gone. "I don't know," she admitted. "Haven't thought that far ahead." "Think now," William encouraged gently. "I need to know you'll have a reason to get up tomorrow morning." Catherine considered his request, understanding that this was important. To him, perhaps one of the last gifts she could give him. William had always been a caretaker, someone who worried about others even when he should have been focused on himself. "I'll probably sit in our kitchen," she began slowly, picturing the scene in her mind. "I'll make coffee, even though I won't want it. I'll call Sarah and Michael to check on them, because they'll be grieving too, and they'll need their mother." William nodded encouragingly, his eyes never leaving her face. "I'll read the newspaper, because you always liked me to read it to you when you were too tired." Catherine continued, the plan forming as she spoke. "I'll probably cry a lot, but I'll also remember good things. I'll look at our photo albums and remember all the happiness we shared." "Good," William breathed. "That's good." "And the day after tomorrow, maybe I'll go see Emma," Catherine said, finding strength in the thought. "She'll need extra hugs from Grandma. I'll tell her stories about her grandfather, about how much he loved her and how proud he was of her artwork." "And the day after that?" Catherine realized what William was doing. He was helping her build a bridge from this moment of ending to a future where she would have to learn to live without him. Each day he asked about would be one step further from this bedside, one step closer to whatever her life would become.
"Maybe
"I'll go back to school," she said, surprising herself with the idea. "You always wanted me to get my master's degree in education. Maybe it's time to finally do that." William's face lit up with a smile that reminded Catherine of the healthy, vibrant man she had married. Even in his weakened state, he could still find joy in the thought of her pursuing dreams they had discussed, but never quite found time to fulfill. "You'd be brilliant," he said with conviction. "You've always been the smartest person I know." "You're just biased because you love me," Catherine teased gently. "I'm biased because I love you," William agreed. "But you really are brilliant. Our children are lucky to have inherited your mind along with your heart." They talked quietly about small, practical things as the hours passed. William wanted to know about their finances, about the house, about decisions that Catherine might need to make in the coming months. These weren't romantic conversations, but they were filled with love in their own way. The love of a husband making sure his wife would be taken care of after he was gone. "The life insurance will be enough," William said, though speaking was becoming increasingly difficult. "Won't have to worry about money. You can take time to grieve, time to figure out what comes next." "I don't want to think about money right now," Catherine protested. "But I need to think about it," William replied. "I need to know you'll be okay financially. It's important to me." Catherine understood. Even now, William was trying to protect her, trying to solve problems and ease burdens, just as he had done throughout their marriage. This was his way of loving her, of ensuring that his final acts were ones of care and provision. As dawn approached, William's condition changed noticeably. His breathing became more irregular, with longer pauses that made Catherine hold her own. Breath in anxious waiting had warned her this might happen. Explaining that the body gradually shut down its systems as death approached, Sarah and Michael arrived early, both having sensed that this would be the day. They joined their mother on either side of William's bed, creating a circle of love and protection around their father as he prepared for his final journey. "We're all here, Dad," Sarah said softly. "We're all here with you." William's eyes opened one more time, moving slowly from one beloved face to another. He couldn't speak now, but his expression conveyed everything he wanted to say. Love, gratitude, pride in the family they had created together, and peace with what was coming. The morning sun began to filter through the hospital room windows, painting everything in gentle golden light. Catherine realized that William would see one more sunrise after all. It's a sunrise that would light his path to whatever came next. "Look, my love," Catherine whispered, turning his face slightly toward the window. "Look at how beautiful it is." William's eyes followed her guidance, taking in the sight of light breaking across the sky. His breathing continued to slow, but his expression remained peaceful, even content. Catherine thought about all the sunrises they had watched together over the years. From that first mountain morning, to quiet moments on their back deck drinking coffee before the world woke up. "This is perfect," she told him. "This is exactly right. You're going toward the light, William. Just like always, you're going toward the light." She held his hand tighter, feeling his pulse growing weaker beneath her fingers. Sarah and Michael each held one of his feet, maintaining physical connection as their father prepared to leave them. The room was filled with love and peace, exactly as William would have wanted his final moments to be. When Kate held William's hand one last time, a silent farewell that spoke volumes, the moment arrived with surprising gentleness. William's breathing gradually became so shallow that Catherine found herself leaning closer, watching for the slight rise and fall of his chest. The morning light continued to grow stronger, filling the room with warmth that seemed to embrace them all. "I love you," Catherine whispered, her lips close to William's ear. "I love you so much. Thank you for everything. Thank you for our beautiful life together." Sarah and Michael added their own quiet words of love and gratitude, their voices mixing with their mothers in a gentle chorus of goodbye. The machines around William's bed continued their quiet beeping. But everyone in the room understood that the numbers and readings no longer mattered. This was about love now, about family, about letting go with grace. William's hand gave one final, barely perceptible squeeze to Catherine's fingers. She felt it, that tiny pressure that seemed to say everything he could no longer voice aloud. Then his breathing stopped, so peacefully that it took Catherine a moment to realize he was gone. The silence in the room was profound but not empty. It felt full of William's presence, full of the love that had sustained their family for so many years. Catherine continued to hold his hand, not ready to let go of their physical connection, even though she understood that his spirit had already begun its journey to whatever came next. "He's at peace," Sarah said softly, her nursing training helping her recognize the peaceful expression on her father's face. "Look how calm he looks." It was true. Death had erased the lines of pain and exhaustion that had marked William's features during his illness. He looked younger somehow, more like the man Catherine had married 25 years ago. The suffering was over, and what remained was simply the shell of someone who had been deeply loved. Margaret entered quietly, moving with the respectful efficiency that came from years of helping families through these final moments. She turned off the machines that were no longer needed, their silence marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. "Take all the time you need," she said gently to Catherine and the children. "There's no rush. He's yours for as long as you want to stay with him." Catherine felt grateful for this kindness, for the understanding that saying goodbye wasn't something that could be hurried. She continued to hold William's hand, marveling at how it still felt like his hand. Even though the warmth was beginning to fade, these fingers had held hers through 25 years of joy and sorrow. He worn the wedding ring that still gleamed on his finger. "Should we call people?" Michael asked uncertainly. "Uncle Robert? The church?" "Soon," Catherine replied. "But not yet. Let me just be with him for a little while longer." Sarah and Michael understood. They had inherited their parents' deep capacity for love. They recognized their mother's need for these final private moments with their father. They stepped back slightly, giving Catherine space while remaining close enough to provide support. Catherine found herself talking to William as if he could still hear her, sharing thoughts and feelings that seemed too important to keep inside. She told him about the cardinal that had been visiting their backyard bird feeder every morning, how she had started leaving extra seeds, because she thought he would have wanted her to. She spoke about the letter that had arrived from one of his former patients, a young woman who credited William with saving her life during a difficult period. The woman had written to thank him and to let him know that she was now married and expecting her first child. A new life that might not have been possible without William's care. "You touched so many lives," Catherine whispered. "You made such a difference in this world. I hope you know that. I hope you can see how much good you did." As the morning progressed, Catherine began the difficult process of letting other people know about William's death. Each phone call felt surreal, as if she were talking about someone else's husband, someone else's loss. The words "William died this morning" felt foreign in her mouth, too big and too final to be real. Uncle Robert, William's younger brother, took the news with quiet dignity, but immediately made plans to drive up from the city. He had been William's closest friend as well as his brother, and Catherine knew his grief would be nearly as deep as her own. The pastor from their church offered to come to the hospital, but Catherine declined. She wasn't ready for official prayers or formal condolences yet. This time belonged to family, to the people who had loved William most intimately and completely. Eventually, practical necessities of death began to intrude on their grief. The funeral home needed to be contacted, arrangements needed to be made, decisions needed to be discussed. Catherine felt overwhelmed by the sudden shift from wife to widow, from caregiver to the person responsible for honoring William's memory in death as she had honored his life during their marriage. "I'll handle the calls," Sarah offered, recognizing her mother's emotional exhaustion. "Shh, you just stay with Dad. We have time for everything else." Catherine felt grateful for her daughter's strength and practical nature. Sarah had inherited William's ability to take charge in difficult situations, to think clearly even when emotions ran high. She would be a tremendous support in the days and weeks ahead. As afternoon approached, Catherine finally found the courage to release William's hand for the last time. The gesture felt monumental, like closing the door on 25 years of marriage. It's 25 years of partnership and love and shared dreams. "I have to let go now," she whispered to him. "But I'm not really letting go, am I? You'll always be with me. In our children, in our memories, in everything we built together." She kissed his forehead gently, feeling the coolness of his skin, but remembering the warmth of all the kisses they had shared over the years. This final kiss carried the weight of every anniversary, every birthday, every ordinary morning when they had said goodbye before heading off to their separate jobs. "Thank you for waiting for me," she said, thinking of his promise the night before, that he wouldn't go anywhere without her. "Thank you for letting me be here. Thank you for letting me hold your hand one last time." Catherine stood slowly, her legs stiff from hours of sitting in the bedside chair. Sarah and Michael moved to embrace her, and for the first time since William's breathing had stopped, she allowed herself to cry fully. The tears came in waves, carrying grief and love and gratitude all mixed together. "He knew how much we loved him," Michael said through his own tears. "He went peacefully because he knew." As they prepared to leave the hospital room, Catherine looked back one more time at the man who had been her everything for more than half her life. William looked peaceful and dignified, free from the pain that had marked his final months. She tried to memorize this final image of him, knowing it would have to sustain her through all the days ahead when she would wake up alone. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered from the doorway. "Until we meet again." The walk down the hospital corridor felt endless, each step taking her further away from the room where her old life had ended and her new life as a widow would begin. But she wasn't walking alone. Sarah and Michael flanked her on either side, providing the support she needed to face whatever came next. Outside, the world continued exactly as it had before, with people going about their daily routines unaware that Catherine's universe had fundamentally changed. The sun still shone, cars still drove past, life still moved forward even though William was no longer part of it. But Catherine carried him with her, in her heart and in her memories, in the love they had shared and in the family they had created together. The hand that had held his for the last time would now have to learn to function alone. But it would never forget the comfort and strength it had found in his touch. Their love story had ended, but the love itself would continue forever, past down through their children and their children's children, a legacy more precious than gold and more enduring than stone. William was gone, but the love they had shared would echo through generations, a testament to what two people could build. Together, when they chose to love completely and without reservation,